Hello and good evening, everybody, and thank you so much indeed for joining us on this, what is in the United Kingdom, a wonderful sunny evening. Says he looking out of the window. And this adolescent and child coach support group is one of our standard monthly events. It's 1 week late. We normally have it on the second Tuesday, but we have been Easter tends to get in the way, Easter holidays and things like that, so we've moved it. We're delighted today to meet with Dawn Campbell. Now, Dawn and I have known each other for quite a few years now, since I've been part of Noble Manhattan Coaching. And she is a coach with a huge amount of experience, a trainer, an author, a presenter, you name it, she does it. And also she's a director of the International Authority for Professional Coaching and Mentoring. And that's my party piece, actually saying that without stopping. Today, I've rather sort of taken Dawn out of her comfort zone because she thought she was going to be talking about accreditation. And she then realized that actually that was not the idea. And she came up with this title of What We Say When We Talk to Ourselves, which is actually very, very useful for adults, but not only adults. It may be our own children, it may be somebody else's children, adolescents as well. We are all guilty of not knowing what to say to get the best out of ourselves. And so we rely on Dawn's experience. Now, just before we joined, Dawn was telling me that once upon a time, a few years ago, she was in Marseille. And the sort of person she is, somebody came up to her partner and offered three camels for her. Now, as far as I am aware, 3 camels is actually quite an expense. And so that is the sort of style and character we're dealing with tonight. So without further ado, Dawn, I'm going to hand the floor to you. And please introduce yourself and talk about your subject.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Ian. Well, it's lovely to meet you all, and I appreciate you taking an hour out of your busy schedule to join us in what I hope is going to be a little bit of fun and interesting, informative discussion. I couldn't quite decide to put in the title what we say or what to say, but I ended up with what we say when we talk to ourselves. Now, it's a big topic, isn't it? Especially for those of us with agitated monkey minds, where thoughts are swinging from branch to branch 24/7. Now, of course, I'm making the assumption that we even notice that we are talking to ourselves all day long. And for some of us, all night long through our dreams. And mostly it's negative. Because unless you meditate or give yourself any kind of quiet me time, you may not even notice your mind is on like a permanent radio station. And we're rehashing stories that have happened to us, that are happening to us, that could happen to us. And then we're adding all the labels that we call ourselves, the criticisms, the anxiety, the fears, the hopes that we attach to those stories. So they get bigger and bigger. And that's the definition of self-talk. It's our inner dialogue. It's our internal talk. It's something we do naturally without our conscious process. And they reveal our innermost thoughts, beliefs, fears, and ideas about ourselves. Now, none of this is wrong. Often they're valid. Sometimes they're useful. Sometimes they're pretty entertaining. It's how we interpret and respond to these thoughts that drive the results. Now, the concept of being able to turn off the radio might be as foreign to you as being able to tame a wild horse, as the Buddhists call our mind. And being coaches, you probably know we have thousands of thoughts a day. I did a little bit of research on this, and I know that a Canadian institute in 2020 said it's about 6,200. But if you Google, there's anywhere in between 50 and 80,000. So I don't know what's a myth and what's true out there. But what is consistent is that 80% of our thoughts are negative. Just pause there for effect. And worse than that, 95% of those thoughts are not even original, which means we're stuck in a repetitive loop day in, day out, and it can be exhausting. As Deepak Chopra says, it's like walking in circles on wet sand. We quickly find ourselves stuck up to our armpits. So at the end of today's time together, we're going to have some tools, tips, and techniques for turning down, if not turning off, our self-talk radio, which is actually great news for the insomniacs. So I thought I'd share with you what goes on my self-talk radio. The program runs constantly. They're called Thoughts and Labels, and they're typically around the stories that I'm living every day. And my daily mantra is another day in paradise, because I'm living the life I love and loving the life I live. I live in seaside Marbella in the winter and rural France in the summer. So I have the best of both worlds. Plus, we have a motorhome. So my philosophy is have wheels, have internet, we'll travel. And it allows me to coach anybody, anytime on the go. So I'm a holistic practitioner. I'm an author. I'm a coach. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm dyslexic. I've got OCD. I'm an English European. I'm an animal lover. I'm a volunteer, always have been. I'm a Buddhist. I'm vegan. I consider myself to be very lucky. So all of those labels are enmeshed in my stories that I identify with. And as I said, I work very hard at being a glass half full kind of girl. And this includes rituals such as practicing gratitude, being mindful, and noticing what I notice in my body and externally. And meditation really helps with that. So typically our radio is playing all of those stories and helping us identify with labels that reinforce the type of person that we are and the type of person we're trying to project to the outside world. And then we act on those stories and giving our daily radio station lots to analyze and for our inner critic to work on. It's kind of relentless and it can drive some of us crazy at some points in our life. Hence, self-mastery of our self-talk radio is an important skill. So that's by way of sharing a little bit about me. So what programs are you playing on your self-talk radio? We're going to take a couple of minutes now to do an exercise. I've shared with you my labels and thoughts. So I'd like you now to consider your labels and thoughts that take up your self-talk. And perhaps you could write them in the chat box and Ian can read some of them out because I can't see the chat box. So we'll just take 2 minutes and see what we've got.
Well, here we go. Thanks, Eloise. Labels, teacher, they're looking for a new career.
What else?
Here we go. Oh, self-talk. How on earth do I decide what I want to do next?
Yeah, big questions.
And Stella's in agreement with that. And I think to a certain extent, I never know what I'm going to do next. And that's from 1 minute to the next, let alone 1 day to the next.
It reminds me of that 80s pop song, You Should Wear Sunscreen. And there's a line in it that says, you don't know what you want to do when you're 20s. Some of the best people I know in my 40s still don't know what they want to do with their lives.
And I think that's one of those things that then reflects down into the teens. as to starting to help them identify what they might like to do. At least if you've got a plan, you can always change it. Mirella comes up
Exactly.
with being a coach and God and dogs and looking for a new career, another looking for a new career, personal
Okay.
brand, community, vocation. Natasha comes up with, am I good enough?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. We'll
Steve is
come to
wondering
that.
what he wants out of life.
Yeah. And of course, we have more than one purpose in life, as my slide showed you. We don't have to find the purpose. There are lots of purposes. Okay, so there's quite a lot of labels there and a couple of questions, and we'll come back to some of those. Now,
Eloise, can I just
yeah,
stop you one? Because Eloise has just come up with, will I ever get there?
yeah, it's like a child in the back of the car. Are we there yet? We're, as the Buddhists say, we're always there. Yeah, it's here right now. Yes, we're there. So exactly, you're getting a sense of exactly what your clients are going to be presenting. These are the radio programs they're playing on their self-talk radio too. We know they're saying things such as, oh, with my luck, things will never work out, or I never have enough money, or I don't know what career I want to do. I can't find a relationship or love, etc. They are also rehashing all their stories to find evidence to prove they can or they can't do something. That's why they've come to coaching. And these stories include their fears, their insecurities, their losses, worries, hopes, and things that stress them out. And it's our job as coaches to help them play a kinder self-talk so that they are less anxious, more hopeful, and can overcome their self-sabotage radio. So what we're talking about tonight, because it's a mixed audience, it could be for you personally. This is going to be your takeaway. For other people, it's going to be, well, it's for myself, but it's also my coachees. It could be you're working with children, and these are things that you can use to help you with the children that you're supporting. So I love this graphic. The heaviest burdens that we carry are the thoughts in our head. I mean, that just speaks volumes. So when you're with a client or you're sat quietly with yourself, what signs alert you to the fact that something deeper is going on? And this list that I've created is fairly typical. So when you're with perhaps an adolescent or a coachee or yourself, you want to be noticing the language. It could be talk around fear. It's usually self-critical. So I must do this, I should, I always. And there's usually no boundaries, and people break their promises even to themselves. There's a great deal of procrastination going on as well. You know, they know what they want to do, they know what they should do, they know what they must do, but they will do anything to avoid doing it, taking action. And they tend to dwell very heavily on mistakes and the negativity, usually around themselves. They blame themselves, they make excuses. And they'll also be demonstrating limited self-expectations. You know, so when you're talking to somebody and let's take an example, they want to lose weight. And as coaches, we use the scale 1 to 10, but we've got to recognize not everybody wants to be a 10. And they might be a 1 or a 2 at the moment. So great, you're on the scale. Where would you like to be? They might be happy with a 3 or a 4 or 5, you know, baby steps, and not really keen on pushing themselves to a 7 or an 8. So you might need to work with their limiting beliefs around their expectations, because typically they don't want to expand their comfort zones. They also won't prioritize things. They find that really difficult, and they won't rise to a challenge. They might talk a good talk, but they'll come back after session and they're not doing it. And then when you challenge them, they'll quite often be aggressive rather than assertive. So those are some of the typical things that you will be listening out for, because you'll be listening intuitively, which is one of the 1 out of 7 types of listening that you're trained as a coach to listen out for. anything that you can think of that you've experienced in yourself or with a client, just add it into the chat box now. We'll just take a moment. If there's anything based on your experience that you would like to add to that list, and I will add it for next time. Anything, Ian?
Helps if I unmute, doesn't it? Eloise has come up with self-doubt.
Yes, yes, definitely self-doubt. So I would say that possibly fits in limited self-expectations. They are full of doubt, they're self-sabotaging. So yeah, good one, thank you.
And one from Natasha, imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes. Yes, actually, I must write those two on there. So self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Thank you. Okay, so on to our first book recommendation. For those of you who don't know Brené Brown or her work, she's a vulnerability expert. And she's written this marvelous book called Atlas of the Heart. I highly recommend it, because if we want to find our way back to our authentic selves or find a common ground with the person that we're dealing with, whether it's a client, an adult or a child, then we need to better understand the language they are using so that when our clients share their stories, we can better understand them. And this book provides a framework for more meaningful connections. Bearing in mind, of course, that our clients are a mixture of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Now, Brené, when she did her research for this book, interviewed over 7,000 Americans on what are the emotions that you tend to experience on a day-to-day basis. Can anybody guess what they were? Just quickly, randomly put the typical emotions that people put in the chat box. Ian, if you read them out, thank you.
Fear, anger,
Yeah,
shame,
yeah,
anxiety, frustration,
yeah.
vulnerable, guilt.
Great. Well, she'd have
All
done
those
a
are good
lot
answers.
better if she had interviewed you guys, because believe it or not, the common denominators out of 7,000 people that she interviewed were happy, angry, sad.
Oh, here
3
comes
emotions.
happiness.
Yeah, angry, happy, sad. That was the limit of the vocabulary that they expected all the other emotions to fit in. Well, in fact, Brené has identified 87 emotions and experiences that define what it means to be human, not just those 3. So understanding language helps us better understand not just ourselves, but also whether our clients are presenting masks or are a true reflection of what they're saying and feeling. So now we better understand the importance of language, particularly emotional language. Let's change the record that we're playing on our self-talk radio. How do we do this? Well, it's okay to say, just be positive. You know, that can be a bit woo-woo. How do you do it? I think one of the best ways to do it is by using transpersonal coaching questions. And those of you that have read John Whitmore's book, Coaching for Performance, will be familiar with this already. So I am going to challenge you for the next 3-4 minutes to answer these questions yourself. Now, these are transpersonal questions. What brings you joy? What makes your heart sing? What are you passionate about outside of work? So take 3 or 4 minutes now to write up your answers, if you would, please.
Here we go. Here's one. Natasha's come up with the three: family, learning, and people.
So connection is very important.
There we go. Dancing, family, serving.
Nice.
Oh, they're coming fast and furious now. I can't cope. Traveling, photography, Korean drama, sex, reading. Freedom to choose, one with nature, experiencing new things. Happy people, spring, self-reflection. Interesting. Here's a good one. Answer to all questions. Being outside, trail running, exploring, singing, acting, talking to others, laughing, reading, watching dogs.
Who doesn't love watching dogs and cats on YouTube? All cute babies.
Oh, you can keep the cute babies, but we've got our own dogs to watch. And then they talk to each other. And they talk
It
to
is the
us.
number one thing, watching cats and then dogs and then babies. To lift people's spirits. It's true. Okay. I think we've
Playing sport with others, traveling, reading, learning,
yeah,
dancing, reading, being in nature.
good. Some wonderful answers. I can really get a sense for the energy and the joy and the passion for those things outside of work. Now consider how your thoughts would change throughout the day if you asked yourself those three questions at the start of every day. You know, we just get out of bed, we dash habitually into our routines. And okay, we try and do a little bit of this or a little bit of meditation or a bit of gratitude journal, but you know, it takes a long time to form a habit, etc. But if we can start to ask ourselves as if we're our own best client, which I think is one of the number one benefits of training to become a coach, even if you never have a business as a coach, you become your own best client, you benefit. Ask yourself those questions on a regular basis. You've had the modality of writing it down and reading it and seeing it. So therefore your brain is starting to compute that in a way that it wouldn't do if you just said it out loud and never thought about it again. But if you keep coming back to that, your mindset, your radio will start to change. Now consider how different your coaching session would be if you ask those three questions at the start of every coaching session as a way of building rapport and getting to know your client rather than diving straight in, focusing on the presenting problem. So I know, having been a mentor for Noble Manhattan, you know, for over a decade, a lot of students really struggled with T-Grow. They asked what the topic was and they went straight into what are the options, you know, missing out those other elements. And this is where we could ask those three questions. The good thing about asking them is that it gives us so much information about how we can use it in a coaching session to keep the client positive. So for instance, I'll give you an example. I had a client that said, I work all hours because I have to make more money for the family. Now that was the presenting problem. But instead of focusing on the problem of having to make more money, which by the way is a belief to explore, knowing what filled my client's heart with joy, what their passions were outside of work, I was able to uncover so much more about the person, their hobbies, their various roles that they play, and how we could explore which ones support their need to make more money. And some of you mentioned some great ones that, you know, hobbies can become side hustles. So photography, you could earn money from photography. And so I was able to support my client to think about ways of making more money outside of work that were connected to his passions. If I had focused just on, oh, I've got to help my client make more money, and we would have focused on the work, and I would have ended up piling on the stress of, well, does he work more hours? Does he do overtime? Does he ask for a pay rise, etc., etc.? No, we turned it around completely to what were some of the ways that he could make more money, including emptying his loft and having a car boot sale. That raised a couple of £100 towards the holiday that he wanted to give the children, etc. So these transpersonal coaching questions, focusing on the person rather than the problem, can really help change the negative self-talk around their beliefs. So positive mental attitudes. Now, I remembered when I said to Ian about what am I going to talk about to your group tonight? I suddenly thought, years ago when I was starting out as a coach, I had a positive mental attitude program, and it was a 9-week passport program, and they would come to the gym and I would stamp it. So we had a little bit of fun. And if they got to the end of the 9, they got like a complimentary coaching session. But I had my laptop stolen at Christmas, which was horrifying and liberating at the same time. So I didn't have any of that material. So I had to rack my brains and start again. But personal freedom comes from having peace of mind. So it all begins in the mind. So let's just brainstorm. How are we going to achieve that sense of freedom? So you might want to take some notes here, because you'll be surprised to learn that the biggest obstacle to our personal freedom is right between the ears. A negative mindset is the biggest block to freedom we're ever going to experience. And there are plenty of wartime stories of people who were incarcerated, who said that nobody could actually break their mind. It was who was it, Ian? Somebody, Franklin, a man thinketh. Anyway, I can't remember. It's gone out my mind. But nobody else can free your mind in the way you can, because there are so many parts of our lives that we cannot control. From the need to go to school, the need to earn a living, the desire to find true love. The only thing we can really control is our mindset. That's our thoughts, and how that translates into actions in the world. So how can you overcome these psychological blocks and open your mind to achieve your desired goals so you enjoy greater freedom? So firstly, start by catching yourself talking negatively in real time, especially around the labels. So this means you now need to start thinking and listening intuitively to what's going on in your radio. And then practice reframing it into positive self-talk, as I know the coaches on this call know exactly how to do. You'll talk to yourself as if you would talk to others and you want people to talk to you. So they say, don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to somebody else. So catching and reframing is a skill like any other. It's going to take practice to create this new habit. You might only catch yourself 3 or 4 times a day. In a couple of weeks, you might be shocked to find yourself saying 40 odd negative things to yourself that you wouldn't say to somebody else. It's a myth that it only takes 21 or 30 days to break a habit. It really depends on how long and how ingrained that habit is. You want to mix with other positive thinkers, and somebody said that in the chat box. So whether it's on the podcast that you listen to, who you hang out with around the coffee machine, what you're reading, it's really important, because the saying goes that whatever you're doing and thinking and saying today is a reflection of what you were doing, saying and thinking 5 years ago. So if that's a shock and you don't want to be in the same place next year or in 5 years' time, you need to start changing what you're doing. And that is primarily around what you're thinking, what you're reading, what you're listening to, and who you're with. Remember the power of anchors, affirmations, practicing gratitude and journaling. Practice meditation. When people are depressed, they might turn to medication, whereas meditation has been proven to be hugely beneficial to people who are not feeling well if their mental health is in need, especially when you practice metta, loving kindness meditations. It really helps with the study of the self, and it equals self-mastery. The whole point of meditation is not to become blissed out. It's not to escape or shut our thoughts. Our mind will never switch off. Doesn't matter how good you are at meditating. And I'm a meditation guide and have been for many years meditating. That won't happen. But it's how we control our thoughts. So thoughts, it's the brain's job to send thoughts, but we don't have to engage in the thoughts. Okay. So that's self-mastery. And then there's cognitive behavioral therapy distraction techniques, such as wearing an elastic band on your wrist. And every time you say something horrible or negative or critical to yourself, you ping it. Or conversely, I had a client who every time they caught themselves saying something positive, they put £1 in the jar. And at the end of the week, they treated themselves. There's loads of fun things you can do depending on who you're working with, whether it's yourself, a child, or an adult. And of course, we need to set boundaries for ourselves and for others and start fulfilling our promises. And as coaches and entrepreneurs and humans, we don't tend to praise ourselves. So celebrate your wins with a pat on the back, because if you don't, nobody else will. It felt a bit cheesy when I got a new mentor and he starts every session with me, well, what have you done well since I saw you last month? And I'd say, oh, this, and this. And he's going, yay, you clap for yourself. And I thought, no, I can't do it. I'm very British. We don't do that. But I've got used to it. And he's right. If you don't acknowledge your wins and celebrate, who else will? And explore your superpowers. We've all got them. Mine's dyslexia and OCD. And your attitude can become your superpower, not your disability. Think about what attributes does it bring to your life, to what you're doing. And of course, always be responsible for your own energy. Stay away from energy vampires. I'm very high energy. And even your own gremlin who's sat on your shoulder, which I tend to think of as a mean sister, can be an energy vampire, because how you do anything is how you do everything. And also appreciate and accept yourself as the imperfect, perfect human that you are. If you really like that sort of thing, visit Pema Chodron, a Buddhist nun who talks very, very eloquently around this. And through meditation or not, if meditation is not your thing, just breathe and let go and release whatever needs releasing. There's a great poem I recommend it's read by lots of people, but the one I really love is Sapphire Rose. And he reads, it's a beautiful name, isn't it? Sapphire Rose. He reads the poem, She Let Go. And as a repressed Brit, I had a lot of stuff I was holding on to. And I found that really liberating to read that poem. And I share it with all my clients now. It's fantastic. They love it. Practice self-care. We need more sleep. Stay hydrated. Our brain needs that water. Go for a walk in nature. I was so pleased to hear in the chat box that a lot of you like to be grounded in nature and go for a walk. So that's really great. Take a nap if you need a nap. And a big one is stop with the F word. In January, there was a campaign to stop people saying, fine, I'm fine. What does fine mean? Who knows? And as coaches, as teachers, as people who serve and look after others, it's incumbent on us to dig deeper. And that's why I shared with you the Atlas of Emotions, so that you can help your client more accurately describe what they mean. If somebody says they're fine, for me, that would probably be a red flag that there's something deeper going on. And then as we come to the end of my list of tips, notice what's going right in your world. You know, we can't take on the weight of the world on our shoulders. So just notice what's going on right in your world. And that can have a big impact on your mental health. And rituals help too, of course. I start my day with the 3-3 method. And it's very simple. Before I get out of bed, I have 3 minutes meditation. I say 3 things I'm going to be grateful for. And I say 3 things I'm committed to achieving that day. That's it. Job done. That takes so much pressure off me. So changing your focus will help you change your habits. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour of some of the positive mental attitude techniques that will help you enjoy more personal freedom. And now I'm going to share with you a cartoon just because I love it. It's about being kinder to yourself. And we'll do this now. Let's just take a moment. Enjoy a nice, deep, fresh breath in. Think about every mistake you've made, even in the last hour, in the last day. God knows we've got more than enough to think about. And then exhale, breathe it out. To err is to be human. None of us are perfect, so let's just stop pretending. We're all a work in progress, just doing our very best. The fact that we show up can be good enough. And when we take a deep breath in, long and slow, we relax the vagus nerve, which slows down the heart rate. And this awareness stimulates our parasympathetic nervous system. And in turn, that reduces the amygdala activity, which in turn reduces our stress. And it balances that hormone cortisol. Okay, so you always have, doesn't matter what situation you're in, you always have your breath to rely on. And we always want more kindness. So start with yourself. Okay, so why does our self-talk even matter? What are some of the benefits of a positive mental attitude? Well, there's a huge amount of research on longevity. And if longevity is one of your things, I certainly love looking it up. Read The Blue Zones. It's a great book. They've identified 5 areas where people in the community live healthily and happily past 100. So a positive mental attitude helps you be physical and improve your physical and mental health. It's proven to give you a greater resistance to pain and illness. There have been people who have had surgery through just meditating and visualization rather than drugs. Not sure I fancy it myself, but you know, I'd be open to trying perhaps a little filling with on meditation as opposed to an injection. It lowers rates of depression and anxiety, and it means that we're better able to cope with stressful situations. You've got better coping skills during times of hardship, and it is a true measure of our peace of mind. Now, it's unclear why people who engage in positive mental experiences have better health benefits. One theory is it just enables you to cope better with stressful situations, which reduces the harmful health effects of stress on the body, where it's too much cortisol. So it's also thought that positivity and optimistic people tend to live longer, because they're having more activity, following a healthier diet. They don't smoke, they don't drink to excess, etc. But as I say, the Blue Zones explains it in a lot more detail if this is going to be one of your areas that you want to focus on. And I love this quote: just stop shoulding on yourself, I must, I should, etc. Because that's not, you putting stuff on yourself. It's usually somebody else doing it. Okay, listen and silence are spelled with the same letters. I was shocked when I read that. I didn't know that. That's a pretty cool pub quiz question, isn't it? So, as coaches, I know you'll know this subject inside and out. And if you're new to it, then just Google. There's 7 types of listening and 9 types of silence. Who knew? All I'll say here is to listen to your intuition. We talked a little bit about the flags and the language people are using. So listen out for beliefs that raise red flags that you or your client is struggling with something. And don't be afraid to dig deeper and use that question: who else apart from me can support you achieve such and such? Is a good way of raising the fact that there are other modalities out there to complement coaching if you think somebody needs deeper help than a coaching session is going to provide. And yes, silence is a form of communication, so get comfortable with it and resist the urge to fill every silence, because usually somebody else is just thinking. So how we change our self-talk is by changing our perception and what we focus on. So I'm going to share some more tips with you that you might like to jot down. Stop catastrophizing and personalizing everything. You're not always the one to blame. Stop filtering out the good. Now, an example here is you've just had a review with, say, your manager, and it was all good, but there was one negative thing, and that ruins the rest of your day because that's all you can focus on. Don't do that. Stop saying, should, must, and magnifying the issue. Stop polarizing, which is to label things good or bad, having a black or white mentality, no gray. There's always an in-between. And somebody mentioned this already. Stop with the perfectionism. You're only setting yourself up for failure. Stop trying to control everything and everybody, including yourself. And going back to that Sunscreen song from the 80s, he says something in there about stop worrying, because other people don't think about you quite as much as you think they do. So when you're 20, you care what people think. When you're 40, you stop caring what people think. And when you're 60, as I am, you realize nobody was thinking about you in the first place. So you've wasted all that time worrying what people are thinking about, because they're predominantly focused on themselves, not you. So as I come towards the last few minutes, I've got some more book recommendations for you that I really think help, because a lot of the time you can't change the situation. For instance, you can't change your job immediately, or you can't change your relationship immediately. What you can change is your relationship with your thoughts. And all of these books are ones I recommend to my clients. They're about $5.99 on Amazon. They're less than 100 pages. They probably take about 2 hours to read each. They're fun and they're real. They talk about, relationships. They talk about jobs. So I would seriously recommend you investing in getting those. And now we're just going to do a very quick exercise to stop shoulding on ourselves. Everybody has consistent inner monologue, what psychologists call self-talk. And we already know now from today's session, this is mostly negative. Now, let me just go back. And the messages that we received in our childhood are resurfacing as adults as an inner critic. Now, the good news is, as we've said, with a new perspective, we can reprogram that inner critic so it becomes our inner coach. And we're going to take a few minutes now, just before we end, to make a list of as many negative things that our inner critic says about us. And I want you to be alert to phrases such as you always, you never, you should. And by the way, when you're relationship coaching, those are the biggest relationship fails that people talk about, because you're attacking the person rather than the behavior. So on a piece of paper, or again in the chat box, just share what your inner critic is saying. So we're looking for the negative labels here. We'll just have a minute. And now we're going to reframe those negative labels into something positive. So again, just write the opposite now. And if you want to share them in the chat box, feel free. And now write one sentence that is something lovely and positive about yourself. Let's end on a high. I know a lot of people find this really difficult, but hopefully after 45 minutes together, you're starting to reframe your self-talk. This is how you change your self-talk and fix that broken record into a new track that's full of encouragement and positivity. What have we got to share, Ian, please?
I can get there, rather than how on earth will I get there?
Lovely. Yes, perfect.
I'm good at spreading joy in others.
Yes.
And then there's I'm not good enough. I'm good at motivating people.
Mm.
And I can't scroll down fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
I am good enough.
Yes.
I'm good at getting people together. Mm.
Yeah. Well, I can see there's been lots and lots of comments in the chat box, so thank you for engaging with that. So, some final thoughts. Happy people expect things to go well. Happy people expect things to go well. That's important because mistakes and problems don't crush them. They don't catastrophize. They don't blame. Now, the Dalai Lama said, we've never had so much, but been so unhappy, as we constantly strive for bigger, better, more, and shinier. And social media is partly responsible for that. So choose to step outside of this mentality and adopt an attitude of gratitude, because studies show gratitude builds resistance. So before I wrap up, I just want to share with you that the IAPCNM are hosting a totally complimentary, very positive, I have to say, week-long online CPD and business building event. You are all invited to. You want to block out your diary if you can. From the 8th to the 12th, there are 4 fantastic world-class speakers every day who are going to be sharing how they grew their business, because there's no such thing as an overnight success or a silver bullet. And they're going to share with you their philosophy of how being of service helped create their brand, their reputation, and a thriving practice to the point that they are now speakers on the world stage, international bestsellers, award-winning coaches, and very successful entrepreneurs. So it's a one-click registration when you go to the international directory, international coaching directory website. So there's that for you. And for anybody on the call who is on the path of being a coach, you are welcome to apply for your individual accreditation. And even though you're not going to become accredited until somebody like Ian at NMC has signed you off, you can benefit from thousands of pounds worth of benefits by growing your business while you're studying. And that's David and I who run the IAPCNN. So I think we've got 5 minutes or so for any questions, haven't we, Ian? Any final comments?
Yes, we have got 5 questions, and I'd just like to say, Dawn, thank you so much indeed. And I'm very, very glad you weren't sold for 3 camels, because otherwise would have not had the benefit of your time this evening, which has been absolutely tremendous. And I, for one, am going to have to revisit this recording. There is so much on there that it's going to be absolutely superb just to sort of sit back, relax-ish, and go through all of those hints and tips that you've given. So whether we're actually coaches, whether we're not coaches, whether we're considering coaching, whether we were just interested in the first place, there is so much there, and so much also that we can pass on towards others, either in a professional capacity or in a familial capacity, with colleagues, and any age group as well. And that's the benefit of tonight's talk. It is so wide-ranging. It can be offered to anybody, including ourselves. So thank you so much indeed, Dawn. Now, are there any questions? Deathly hush. How about that? You stunned them into praise. How about that? If there are no questions, then thank you so much indeed, everybody, for coming along. Oh, hang on.
Sorry.
Here's one.
Hi, Dawn. Sorry.
Steve, you go for it.
Hi, Dawn. Thanks for that. Really interesting. I'm starting the journey of coaching. I've lived a varied career. I've been in the military for 38 years, and I want to kind of diversify into something different. One of the key points you raised there is just be positive. What challenges have you had, and what pitfalls do you encounter in just be positive of other people?
Yeah, I think I said something like, you know, it's not enough when you're dealing with a client who's suffering with mental health issues or negative self-talk or self-sabotage, procrastination, perfectionism. It's not enough to say, just be positive. You have to give them tools, tips, and techniques to change their mindset, change that broken record that they're stuck with. So I know I whizzed through quite a lot, and maybe it will need to be listened to again. But people are conditioned, as we said, from childhood, from labels. They absorb so much, and then they reenact it, they polarize it, they catastrophize it, and it resurfaces as adults. So I think one of the ways, particularly as you're starting out as a coach, Steve, is read John Whitmore's book and start thinking about transpersonal coaching, so that you get the person to start thinking about themselves and not a problem. So there's a lot of things that I could be revisited in tonight's discussion that we had that will help you with that, if that's going to be a niche market. But it's definitely not a woo-woo, you know, one size fits all. You've really got to dig deep about what is it that the person is interested in, and then you can start to explore where the cracks are in their record and their beliefs that make them believe that, and help them reframe it. As a lot of those beliefs are like a broken record, and as coaches, we have the tools and the techniques to get our clients to change.
Thank you.
Dawn, there's another question that's just come in that says, why are so many thoughts negative?
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
that's a
so
good
why
one.
do you think so many thoughts are negative?
Yeah. I think it's because we believe our labels and the stories that we identify with, and then we make them bigger. And, you know, the more we play them, it's a bit like a lie, isn't it? You know, if you've had a child and they've told a lie, by the time it comes out as a truth, a week or so later, that lie has got so big. And I think that's the reason why we have so many negative thoughts, because it's on a loop. And there's this, particularly now with social media, where there is all this perfectionism, you know, look great, earn a load of money, be a 7-figure coach, etc., etc. I think the pressure is just so great, and we think that's never going to be us because we got a bad comment in a review once, and that's what we focus on rather than all the good stuff. So our mind is predisposed, I think, to seek out the negative that we heard, the label or whatever it was that we've associated with. So we need to find more evidence that contradicts that. So when we're coaching, it's not about when was the last time you were unhappy with. It's when was the last time you were happy with such and such? Great. What was happening then that we can use that will help you be happy again? So always focusing on the positive rather than helping the client go down a rabbit hole of feeling even worse.
I think that answers that
I'm
question.
rushing because I know you've got to go at 7 o'clock.
I think that answers that
6 o'clock.
question very succinctly. So, Dawn, thank you so much indeed. If anybody has any further questions that they want to email to me, I will pass them on to Dawn. I will get a list of books out that Dawn has quoted, and also Dawn, if you could send me so I can send it out, the International Coaching Week link, then I'll get that promulgated as well. Just one final thing, if anybody is interested, we have a foundation, Noble Manhattan has a foundation in adolescent coaching course starting on the 2nd of May. And this is sort of 8 live online 2-hour sessions, finishing 26th of June. If you're interested, please drop me a line. The course itself, you don't need to be a coach to be on it. You can use the information for your own benefit, for your family benefit. And many adults who've been on the course have changed their lives or parts of their life just through being on that course. So up to you. I'd love to hear from you. And if there's anything we can do to support you, either in a coaching journey or just generally, then please don't hesitate to contact us. And thank you so much indeed for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you.